Welcome to Making Peace Visible, the podcast about peace, conflict, and the media. I'm your host, Jamil Simon. One of the things I love about making this podcast, I get to talk to pioneers, people who are inventing new approaches, people who see things and do things differently. The people we talk to on Making Peace Visible are creating new ways to build peace or report on conflict. Today, we're talking to a young pioneer who's built a successful NGO called Media Association for Peace, or MAP, which promotes peace journalism in a very difficult environment, post-war Lebanon. Vanessa Bassil grew up in a deeply divided country. It was divided mostly by religion and ethnic heritage, but also by wealth and class. She encountered peace journalism in a workshop led by Professor Jake Lynch and decided that peace journalism had a lot to offer her country that suffered massively from ethnic and religious violence. Vanessa, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Vanessa, you were born in Lebanon in 1988, and you've said you're part of Lebanon's post-war generation. Can you help us situate it a little bit within the context of Lebanon's Civil War and what came after?
Yeah, the Civil War in Lebanon started in 1975 and it lasted until 1990. So I was born just 2 years before the war ended. Yeah, it's a 15 years civil war. And of course, my generation is the first generation that grew after the Civil War. That's why we consider ourselves the first post-war first generation.
Was it growing up this way in this kind of atmosphere? Is that what made you become a bridge builder?
Yeah, I think that our generation has kind of inherited all the trauma of the previous generation, our parents' generation. So, of course, we have grew up in this very tense atmosphere. And I mean, we had to deal with all the consequences and the effects of the war on our generation that grew up not really, knowing what peace is and what safety is and, how we can live in a country where there are no divisions and there are no fear of a new war. Lebanon does not really live in lasting peace. Our peace is continuously threatened. So I think that the country is currently living in negative peace atmosphere and not really in a positive peace because reconciliation did not really happen yet. The reconstruction on all levels did not really take place. So I think there's a long way to go for a real and lasting positive peace.
Well, I imagine a 15-year civil war would create a huge amount of trauma and, emotional residue, so to speak, for the population.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, of course, I do not consider myself being a sectarian person as such, but definitely I grew up in a sectarian atmosphere, coming from a Christian family, a Christian Catholic Maronite family, and living in a region or an area that is only populated by Christians. I did not really have the chance to meet the other, which is in this case, of course, the Muslim in the country. So always I had this curiosity to actually, know what it feels like to live in an area that's more diverse, I would say, and that has people from all backgrounds. So when I joined the university classes and actually more precisely when I started to become an activist, this is when I really had exposure to the others that are from different backgrounds. And that was the first time that I actually met people that are non-Christians. So it's not like that I grew up in a family that would not allow me to, meet people from other backgrounds, but it's just that how the way is in Lebanon, like the country is divided also geographically, so it's culturally divided, socially divided, politically divided, but also geographically divided. So I just happened that I grew up in an area that's mostly populated by Christians and that I went to a Catholic Christian school and lived in a Christian area. So I had to get out of this bubble and meet people from different backgrounds to really, have a better understanding of Lebanon, the reality and history.
Well, you just described an incredibly segregated society between the different religious groups. Do you think that segregation is reflected in the media? In other words, are Christians and Sunnis and Shias getting their news and information from sources that cater to each community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the media in Lebanon is also very divided. And at the end of the day, it's a reflection of the society groups, right? So every sectarian group has its own media outlets and they follow the news that are only broadcasted by this very particular media. So the exposure to the media is also extremely divided and polarized. And thus, people in Lebanon do not really have the bigger picture of what's happening and the reality or the truth of what's really happening. So everybody is divided also among sectarian lines, and the media is only reflecting this division instead of really building bridges of understanding and communication between these groups.
So, given that situation, it's almost like no one is getting the whole story.
That's true. I think that nowadays there are more awareness, about the reality of the media and how media is portraying also the reality of the country. But I would say that there's still a lot of work to do because people are still, believe the media and they still only watch the news that, it's like the confirmation bias principle. They only follow the news that confirm their own
Yes.
biases. Yeah, and so that's the reality of the country. And if we study the political economy of the media, definitely also we conclude that the media is being funded by political parties and sectarian groups that have their own interests
Right.
and agendas. And most of the media in Lebanon is commercial. We only have like one state-owned television, which really does not have a big audience. And the rest of the media, they are commercial and they are privately owned. And so you can imagine, the competition that is there and, the agendas.
You used to work as a freelance journalist. Can you tell us about a story you reported on that you were especially proud of?
Yeah, I started my career actually as a freelance journalist. I decided to be a freelance journalist because I knew what was really happening since the very beginning. Like I kind of felt that the media is extremely polarized and divided, and I did not really want to commit to a one particular media institution and to work for it. So that's why being a freelance allowed me to work for different media outlets.
Hmm.
On one side, I had the freedom and the independence to work and can write whatever I want. And on the other side, it also
Hmm.
allowed me to be exposed to different political agendas and different thoughts and different ideologies, which also was a source of richness for me. So while working as a freelance journalist, I was always trying to find stories that would build those bridges of understanding between different groups and that would kind of change the assumptions that we have towards each other and break the stereotypes. So I was always trying to find stories this way. And I think most of the stories I was writing about were usually meetings or seminars or camps, youth coming from different backgrounds that were grouped by some associations like civil society organizations in Lebanon that are actually very active when it comes to peace building. So I was always going to these camps and staying a few days with the people there and trying to report their narratives, their experiences, and how they are living this dialogue, because it's also like living a dialogue. It's not only talking with people but also living with them. So my
Hmm.
stories reported this dynamics that was there.
Well, yeah, in a sense, it's not surprising that you were attracted to peace journalism. I mean, it's really become your passion and your life's work. It's been a while since we did our episode on peace journalism, and most people aren't familiar with the term. Can you give us a quick refresher on what peace journalism is and what does it look like in Lebanon?
Yes, the definition of peace journalism is actually when the journalists choose what stories to report and choose the way they report it. So it's more about the what to report and the how to report it in a way that would create nonviolent responses from the public. So the whole point of peace journalism is actually to report stories that would facilitate dialogue among divided groups and that would also highlight peace initiatives that usually they are underreported by mainstream media. And of course, I was attracted to peace journalism without even knowing that it was called this way through the stories that I was reporting. I was just telling you previously that, I was trying to find stories that actually highlight those dialogues that were happening between different groups that were not highlighted in the media. And I remember actually one day I took this story to my editor in chief in one of the news outlets that I was writing for. And I told him that I talked to people from different backgrounds, like Christians and Muslims and, Sunnis, Shiites, and, all these denominations. And I remember very well his reaction. He was like, were they really living together for 10 days in this camp? Like, he was very surprised because he did not even like believe that, something like this is even happening.
Right.
And I talked about the story. I reported, I experienced it. It was like very, very positive. So yeah, so I mean, after that, I actually took this workshop by Jake Lynch in Beirut. And of course, it was, a life-changing experience because I was like, okay, this is what I really want for the rest of my life.
A lot of lights went off.
Yes.
Well, tell us about your NGO, the Media Association for Peace.
Yes. So after I had some experience in journalism and, I started to also work or become a volunteer in peacebuilding NGOs in Lebanon. And after taking this workshop with Jake Lynch in Beirut, I felt that this is the kind of mission that I want to dedicate myself to. I gathered a group of young journalists or media students, more precisely coming from different backgrounds in Lebanon, different regions and universities. And I decided to share with them what I have learned on peace journalism through my journalistic experience and through the training that I have received, because I wanted also other young journalists to have this knowledge that I had already. And, to also talk to them about the potential that peace journalism has in our country. So my initiative started through a small workshop that I have organized for 20 media students from different backgrounds. It was a residential workshop. And it was very successful. Like, I haven't even imagined that it would be successful. And because it succeeded, many other students that I did not know, they have asked me to offer another training workshop also for them to have those tools and skills and knowledge, acquired. So I did this.
That's wonderful.
So the following year, I have also organized another workshop for another group of students, also on peace journalism, or what's also called conflict-sensitive journalism. And after that, I gathered the two groups that I have already trained on peace journalism in a camp in the mountains in Lebanon. And we have talked about actually the idea of why not becoming an association that would spread peace journalism and would be fully dedicated to that. So I have suggested the idea to the group, and they were also very excited about it. And just a few months after that camp, I have established the organization and I have done all the legal paperwork, and it became official. And we launched it in Beirut with the presence of, professors and media and parents and family and, and everybody.
Could you give us a sense of what goes on in these trainings with students from different backgrounds? Like, for example, how do you break down stereotypes? Can you describe an exercise you might use?
I think the exercises that put people out of their comfort zone are the most powerful one. Like, for instance, when we're hosting, people from different backgrounds, and of course, at the beginning, there's some awkwardness, right? Like, people do not know each other, like they're not sure what to expect or how to interact with each other, and definitely many of them have stereotypes about each other. So what we invite them to do is actually to write all of the ideas that they have about the other person in general, like the other who is different, and to put them on a paper, and read them out loud. And of course, first we make sure that everybody, is in a safe space and that, that nothing is personal and we're addressing issues. We're not talking about personal things. So when you push people to actually talk honestly and frankly about the stereotypes, the ideas that maybe they do not personally believe in, but they have heard from the environment, from the school, from the media about the other person, and to talk about them. And we put them on a flip chart and we start going one by one. We go over them one by one and we start to double check, is this idea true about the other person? Like, there are so many examples we can give about any group in the world, even, but all of these stereotypes,
right, of course.
If you put them on a flip chart, and you read them with the group, okay, let's discuss them. I mean, let's talk about this. Let's address them like in a very like bold way, right? We do not want to hide behind it, or we do not want to, like talk about it with only our group about the other group and not with the whole group. So
it is what it is.
It is what it is, right? Like, we do this exercise, and people at the beginning, they're very embarrassed and uncomfortable, and they don't want to be put in an embarrassing situation. But then when discussion happens, people start to laugh, and they are, like more at ease, and they started to realize that many of these stereotypes are wrong.
Right. Now, learning to walk in the shoes of the other. That's wonderful. I mean, MAP is really the first and the only Lebanese organization focused on peace journalism. It's a little hard to be the first in doing anything, but you persevered.
Yes, it was definitely a very hard mission because also the idea of peace itself is very challenging in Lebanon. It's not easy to talk about peace, and it's not easy to convince people about the possibility of, making peace in a country that was full of conflict. So I think that, it's only about believing first in the idea itself, and then when you start to believe in something, then the idea leads you and opens door for you. So I think this is what happened in my case.
Right. Well, you did two important things. I mean, first, you broadened the audience for these ideas by including academia, civil society, political groups. Tell us why it was important to do that.
Because I think that in Lebanon, it's very important to include everybody in the process of peace building. It's not only the journalists that will be able to make peace on their own. I think like it's
Of
kind of
course.
teamwork. And I always believed in the holistic approach of all these efforts, like everybody should be included in peace in Lebanon, not only one group and not only one field.
Right, right. And the other thing you did was you broadened the topics you focused on to include human rights, the environment, and development, in addition to peace and conflict. Why did it make sense to widen the lens like that?
Okay, so I thought about creating doors and opening those doors to reach peace because I thought that it's not possible, to only approach peace only in one dimension. I mean, conflict could also have different dimensions, and we have to know how to approach this conflict from a holistic approach. That's why I thought that bringing in human rights, development, the environment, and all of these topics could also be very essential to build peace in any post-conflict country. I do not believe that we can make peace in any country if human rights are violated. Like, I really do not believe that we can make peace if development is not happening, if the environment is not respected. And we need all of these aspects in order to build lasting peace in Lebanon. So I thought about, okay, what are the human rights issues in Lebanon? Like, what are the issues that actually the country is suffering from? Definitely, we have issues when it comes to press freedom, especially in the last years. So I wanted to address this also from a journalistic perspective, how the media can contribute to respect freedom of expression and protect freedom of expression. Other issues, for example, are related to the refugees, the Syrian refugees. Also, I wanted to address this in the way media is reporting on these refugees. Other human rights issues are women's rights, peoples with disabilities, minorities' rights, etc. So all of these issues, we do have like problems when it comes to them in Lebanon, right? So
Of
conflict is
course.
not only about being from different sects or being from different political orientations. It's also like not respecting the rights of these issues and not having strong institutions that would protect these minorities and these groups. So I also wanted to address this in the media. And I thought that if the media can be on our side and help us to address those problems and to talk about them in a very open and transparent way in the media, this is one way actually to build peace in Lebanon.
Wow, that's great. No, I mean, because it really, and issues like the environment are also conflict provoking. I mean, I think that's going to be a source of enormous conflict as the environment gets worse over
Yeah,
time.
for sure. And the country actually did suffer from a garbage crisis in 2015. And there were many demonstrations actually that took place that were trying to solve this problem, address this problem, and like demand a change. And those crises that the country went through, of course, the environmental was actually one of them. So by
Right.
the time that when the garbage crisis happened, I thought that this is also like a very important topic to address in the media and see how the media can actually contribute to solving the crisis.
It's a beautiful thing when someone is able to change their mind to correct the prejudice that they've had before. And I'm sure you've seen that happen in your workshops. Can you tell us about a time where one or more trainers changed their mind?
Yes, I can also tell you like a personal experience. I mean, not me personally, but from the participants. Because sometimes, I mean, when the resources allow, I do a residential workshop because I also believe that it's important for people to have a living experience with each other coming from different groups. So I try to put, for example, in the same room, people from different religions or from different political orientations and, and give
Hmm.
them this opportunity to coexist on a very small level, but, that's how I believe that coexistence can expand. And, when I did this for the first time, not really knowing, what the outcomes would be, I had some participants who told me, uh, who told me, oh, for example, oh, I did not know that the other person also uses the same shampoo as mine. So like to that extent, stereotypes in Lebanon were like big, like they did not know that, we also use the same things coming from different religions or backgrounds. We always had these stereotypes that the other is so different, that their culture
Right.
is extremely, contradictory to ours. And, by these very, very small things, you get to realize that at the end of the day, we're not that different, like the differences are more in our heads than actually in the reality. So like this is like one level, I would say, of change. And the other level is when it comes to media content, because we work with case studies with the participants, and we engage them in many discussions when it comes to the role of the media in peace building. And many journalists like did not know that media can even play a positive role, because we consume so much negative news. I mean, it's been more than 10 years or 11 years that we're training those journalists. So definitely, like after 10 years, many things have changed. But many of the journalists, they are working on leading newspapers and TV stations in Lebanon and even regionally, and they're doing very, very beautiful work. And I was also personally very touched by one of the journalists that I have actually interviewed for my PhD just recently. He's now a reporter and a news anchor. And I talked to him about his experience and the opportunities and the challenges maybe that he has in applying peace journalism. And I was like fascinated by seeing and realizing that he still like have this idea. He has it in his heart, and it reflects in his work. Like he truly believes that he can make a change in the way he's reporting the news. And he is actually. I always follow his report, and I feel like I want to cry when when I watch him on TV, because I feel so proud. His name is Ghadi Boummoussa. He's a news anchor and a reporter on MTV. It's one of the leading TV stations in Lebanon, and he's really doing an amazing job in the way he's reporting negative news.
Well, that's a wonderful story. In a sense, one of the things about making peace visible is that we focus on the importance of reaching journalists, because there's a quote from a well-known playwright, Tom Stoppard, who said, if you want to change the world, start with journalists. And in a way, the work you're doing is emblematic of that. I mean, it's exactly, it's like you're living our mantra in a way.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, yeah, sometimes, you feel a bit frustrated because you do not see the outcome of your work right away. But then over the
Of
years, you
course.
start to see that, no, actually, you are doing a change and you are influencing people. And it takes time for change to happen. This is very normal.
Lebanon is currently hosting 1.5 million Syrian refugees. How are Lebanese people coping with the presence of so many refugees, given the difficult economic times and the pre-existing conflicts in the country?
It's very difficult, the situation right now, after more than 10 years of hosting refugees. I think the country cannot take it anymore. And I think, recently many incidents happened that also shaked the country one more time and reminded everyone that, continuing to hosting refugees is something that the country is not able to do anymore. I mean, I personally, and through the work of my organization, we have talked a lot about the importance of addressing Syrian refugees issues in the media in a very constructive way. And of course, we did many projects that would emphasize this. But also, I think that we should be very realistic and, very just in the way we are approaching the situation right now. Because I think it's also not just for the refugees themselves to live in a country that, is not able to provide them with the minimum, because it's not able to provide to even to its citizens with the minimum needs and services. So I think that it's really here the duty of the international community to find solutions for the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, because Lebanon is one of the largest country in the world that is hosting most refugees per capita.
Right. Well, what do you think of the mainstream media coverage of Syrian refugees in Lebanon?
I think that at the beginning of the crisis, when the country first started by hosting refugees, the media was very resentful to hosting refugees. And, there were also many stereotypes around them. And, there was not really support to their presence in Lebanon. And I think they were many times portrayed in a very negative way. Either they were, victims, or they were, the bad people, or, they were a threat to the country. And they were an additional burden and all of that. And of course, that's not the way that refugees are supposed to be portrayed by the media, because this also impacts the way people see the refugees and how they treat them, even on the streets.
Of course, it translates very directly.
Yes, exactly. So it's very risky to portray refugees in this negative way, because of course people will be influenced by the way media is doing so, and they will be even more hateful towards the refugees. And definitely this is not peaceful. So we tried at MAP to gather Syrian journalists, actually, refugees coming to Lebanon to seek refuge, but maybe some of them were also working. So we reached out to them and we invited them to a training and to a public discussion. And we also invited also other journalists, Lebanese journalists, to join. And we had a very fruitful training, because we were very honestly and transparently talking about the issues of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and also, the challenges that they have in living in a country that is under-resourced.
Another interesting project that MAP did was an online talk show about peace and press freedom. You invited a mainstream journalist to discuss whether freedom of expression enables peace. What were some of the ideas that came up? And did anybody argue that the freedom of expression is at odds with peace?
Definitely. It's a very problematic issue to talk about, press freedom and its effect on peace, because some of the journalists were also saying that, if we are very free in the way we express ourselves, also our own safety might be at risk. So definitely, safety issues are also very much linked to peace. So most of the journalists that we have hosted them, of course, they were very ethical and responsible. But I also think that some of them were very influenced by their own political biases. And I think, when you have, a political agenda and you are a journalist, and I think this becomes, a little bit controversial. But I think that it was good to have this dialogue, regardless of, the background of the journalist, it was very constructive and healthy to have a dialogue over these issues and to discuss them with journalists who are actually working every day on reporting on these issues.
Last year, German public broadcaster DW, or Deutsche Welle, did an episode on Lebanon as part of a documentary series called Mediterranean Journey. In it, they traveled to Tripoli and interviewed Leo Baroudi, an activist who runs a reconciliation program there. The host asked her about the difficulties of being bridge builder in a patriarchal society, and she said being a woman was actually an advantage in her work, because men from different groups feel that they can be more vulnerable with her. I wonder if that resonates with your own experience.
I think being a woman definitely has advantages. It has also some challenges, but I never really felt that I am at disadvantage because I am a woman peace activist working in Lebanon. On the contrary, I felt that I have received a lot of support, and that, people were very appreciative of the work that I was doing. And I always, make sure to have gender equality in the training. So I always invite, men and women to take part of it. And they are also, very interested and open and excited to join. So I do not really feel that, I had an extra challenge to work as a peace activist. I felt that I was well placed, and actually, I had what it takes to, do the work. Of course, well, when you are a woman, I think that it would be easier for women to work with you than actually for men. If I might say, definitely, like the interns that we had, in the organization and the volunteers, I think that they were mostly female, and I think probably the topic itself attracts more women than men, right? Like if we want to talk about it objectively, the issues of peace building, I think they are more attractive to women, because men probably think this is not masculine enough, or I don't know, but it happened that women were more present. But when it comes to the relationship with men, I think that Well, in the trainings, it was always a nice dynamics, because if I am the trainer and, the participants are taking part of it and they want to learn, I think, the power dynamics were very clear. And also I use a very interactive way to approach the topics that we are addressing. So I never really had big issues. Of course, there are. So, I don't want to deny them because it's not that easy, to be a woman and, leading these projects and leading these trainings in a patriarchal society. But also, like, I do not have, like, is a big issue or, a challenge that I think I cannot overcome, although I am aware of them.
Well, finally, Vanessa, I want to ask, what is your personal vision for Lebanon? What does meaningful peace or positive peace look like to you?
Wow, that's a big question. Positive peace is definitely something very challenging to achieve, but I think it's not only a vision, it's a dream, right? I mean, growing up in a country that has so much divisions and so much challenges and complications, I think, peace would always be like a dream for, every citizen that want to stay and work in their country. But I am very aware that the challenges, are not little and that we have a lot to do. And as I told you, since I believe in the holistic approach, I think everyone in Lebanon should work together to make this possible. It's not only the journalists, it's not only the teachers, it's not only the government, everybody should work together. Of course, I am working with journalists because, that's my profession and that I strongly believe in. But I also think that everybody should be involved in peace building, not only the journalists or the peace activists. And of course, as the crisis of the refugees that's present, the economic crisis, the cross-border attack between Israel and Lebanon, also the war in Gaza is affecting very much Lebanon.
How can it not? Yeah.
So all of these are challenges, right? And every time you think that you made one step towards peace, something happened again, and you are left with a bit of frustration and I don't know, like ideas that would not be very positive, right? So I think that the current situation is very complicated in Lebanon, and the crisis is still ongoing, and the war is still ongoing, and all the internal problems on the political level, on the social level, on the health level, educational level. I mean, you have no idea how many issues the country is going through.
It must be enormous.
Yes, enormous. And they have to be all addressed in order for the country to reach peace.
Well, the thing is, given the tragedies that the people in Lebanon are witnessing and its impact, in a way, it's really fortunate that you've been doing this work for the past decade and preparing the ground, in a sense, to cover these crises differently. So I think we can all be grateful for that. And I'm very grateful that you joined us today for this discussion. Thank you, Vanessa. I really appreciate your participation.
Yes, thank you very much for hosting me. I also appreciate your invitation. And yeah, I hope that the vision of peace would come true in Lebanon and all over the world.
Vanessa Bassil is the founder and president of the Media Association for Peace in Lebanon. She's currently a PhD candidate at the University of Bonn in Germany. Her degree will be in, what else? Peace journalism. In the show notes, there are links to a series of videos that MAP produced about Syrian refugees in Lebanon with English subtitles. Vanessa recently gave a talk about MAP for the Media and Peacebuilding Project at George Washington University. Our producer, Andrew Maraskin, and I presented in that webinar. You can find a link to that webinar in the show notes. Making Peace Visible is produced by Andrew Maraskin with help from Faith McClure. Stephen Youngblood is the Associate Director of Making Peace Visible. Find us on social media under our new handles. We're at Making Peace Visible on LinkedIn and Instagram. On Twitter or X, we're at Making Peace Viz, V-I-Z. Our website is makingpeacevisible.org. Thanks so much for listening, and talk again soon.